He was most famous for his association with the band INXS, of course, and the drummer from INXS, Jon Farriss, joins me this morning. Jon, good morning, and I'm so sorry for your loss and the industry's loss.
Oh, good morning, Joanna. It's lovely words. Thanks very much. Yes, it's been quite shocking, and just feel so much for Chris's family and children, and mainly the family. It's a huge loss.
Can you take us back to the early days when you first met Chris? Was it at that gig when you were playing with Midnight Oil and Gary Morris sort of tapped Chris on the shoulder and said, check these guys out, and asked whether he'd be interested in managing you? Was that the first night you met him?
Yeah. It's really funny because we're talking about really 40 years ago or more. So the story gets told so often that you often wonder, are you repeating someone else's reality or am I actually remembering this? But yeah, I do remember that we were doing a run of gigs with Midnight Oil, and INXS used to be called the Farriss Brothers. And me being one of the brothers and all, we just all lumped together and chose the Farriss Brothers as our name, but we hadn't really thought much about it. But soon after a year or so playing gigs and stuff and writing our own music, we'd met Gary Morris, who was at that point Midnight Oil's manager, and he was the one who volunteered and suggested that we change our name and get it together with a good name. So at this point, once we changed our name to INXS, we started to get some momentum, and we were doing some gigs, a run of gigs with Midnight Oil, and Chris was their booking agent, and he came and sort of slipped through the backstage door and introduced himself, and I remember just sort of sitting there as he came in, and everyone stood up to say hello to Chris, and that was really the moment. At that point there, he just said, "Look, guys, I think you're amazing, and let's do something together." So we started way back, end of 1979.
Did he always have that charisma?
Chris's charisma has always been there, of course. I mean, you can't sort of fake charisma. I mean, let's face it, either you've got it or you don't. And I think it's also something you can nurture and develop, like any sort of expression. But Chris's, whole personality was larger than life, and of course it comes from the mind and the spirit, and the combination of two mighty forces that he had was really a wonderful component to the charisma of INXS. And so you join that together, and 6 + 1 equals 1,000.
What made him so successful as a manager?
Well, I think he used to think outside the box, and he was very good at analytics. He would be able to assess a situation, look at it, as best as he could, understand it, disassemble it through and through, and then know how to navigate and to as best he could retain the essence of INXS and represent the members and our music in a really complex and a very sort of odd industry, which is known as the music industry, which has all sorts of biases and all sorts of strange ways of working. He was able to get in there and navigate through it and help retain INXS as being as representing us as people as best he could. And that was amazing for us, and so we were very, very blessed.
We were discussing yesterday about Chris's innovative use of he changed the system, really, didn't he? He changed it so that the bands got some of the cover charge and had a direct benefit from the number of people they were drawing in. Is that his greatest legacy for musicians, do you think, or were there others?
Oh, look, I think that's a very good point, Joanne, and I think a lot of, especially in Australia, a lot of that stuff, a lot of that information, a lot of the brilliance that Chris was implementing in daily operations became a standard for most people in Australia in the music business. I don't think anyone quite understands, but what we did was very different from anyone else, and that was really adopted from some international players, the big musical artists and operators who were able to fund their own recordings, own them, and lease them to the record company. You know, do your performances, but arrangements with the venue management and the agency to look after the artists more, and that gave everyone a fairer ground to work on. And it actually inspired everybody more because everyone was able to feel, it was fairer. And so, yes, Chris introduced all manner of things which empowered the artist.
While CM was managing INXS, I think you sold more than 70 million albums worldwide. Clearly one of, if not the greatest Australian band of all time. Perhaps AC/DC sold more, but I wouldn't think too many others. It was obviously a band of incredibly talented musicians that he was managing. Nonetheless, what do you think INXS would have been without his business acumen?
You know, those sort of questions are obviously difficult to answer because, if you want to draw upon a different reality, I mean, you can make up anything you like because that isn't what happened. Look, I mean, I can't imagine what it would have been like in those former years without Chris. It's just impossible to imagine because he was just so set there as part of our brotherhood.
He was very passionate about his chooks. He had a brand, Rock Chicks. He loved living in the country. He sounds like a man of great passions. How will you remember him? Are there any occasions or anecdotes that you'd like to share?
Oh, look, I mean, I don't know how much time we have. I mean, I have so many. Yes, let's go down the list. Chris, really, when we first met Chris was a rural guy, and he R.M. Williams sort of meets rock and roll, and of course that was very inspiring because he came from the land, and it was out sort of Dural out in Windsor, sort of in New South Wales, just to the west of, northwest of Sydney, Australia, New South Wales, Australia. And just by the by, that went on to inspire most of us all to have property out in the country. In fact, I'm living in the country now and love it. But look, Chris's passion was really sort of the main thing about Chris, which was absolutely amazing, was his drive and passion and this powerhouse, this dynamo of energy and emitting from a radius, all around him all the time. Whether it was putting together, eggs to sell or cattle or whatever it was he was farming, or I think his big passion really was horses, but the music thing. And I think that once he knew that he had boys like INXS, a very real thing, that became obviously the center of his focus and passion. So it's very real and very palpable, and you could see the results of